Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the message arrived. He stood on the bridge of the battlecruiser Horizon's Edge, watching the stars through the main window. The ship was on patrol duty near the edge of the solar system, far from Earth and far from trouble. Jake liked the quiet out here. Space was peaceful when no one was shooting at you. The communication officer turned around with a worried look on his face. "Captain, we are getting a transmission from deep space. It is not from Earth and it is not from any human ship." Jake put down his coffee cup and walked over to the communication station. "Put it on the main screen, Lieutenant Cooper." The screen flickered and showed strange symbols that hurt to look at. Then the symbols changed into English words. The voice that spoke was cold and had no emotion in it. "The species designated as human will present themselves for judgment within 30 solar rotations. Non-compliance will result in immediate extinction protocols. This message comes from the Galactic Enforcement Council. Compliance is not optional." The bridge went silent. Every crew member stopped what they were doing and stared at the screen. Jake felt his heart beating faster. He had heard stories about alien contact but never believed they were real. Now aliens were not just real, but they were demanding that humans come to some kind of trial. "Lieutenant Cooper, record everything and send it to Earth Command immediately. Use all available channels and mark it as the highest priority," Jake ordered. His voice stayed calm, even though his mind was racing with questions. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Kane was in her office when the emergency call came through. She had been reading reports about new ship designs when her aide rushed in without knocking. "Admiral, you need to see this right now." It came from Captain Morrison's ship. Lisa watched the alien message 3 times before she believed it was real. Then she activated the emergency protocols that had never been used before. Within 2 hours, representatives from every major nation on Earth were gathering for an emergency meeting. The room was full of tension and fear as world leaders tried to understand what they were facing. Dr. Alan Cross was the first expert to arrive at the meeting. He had spent 15 years studying space signals and had always believed that aliens existed somewhere in the universe. Now his theories were proven correct in the worst possible way. Based on the transmission patterns and the technology required to send this message, these aliens are far more advanced than we are, he told the assembled leaders. If they wanted to destroy us, they probably could do it without much effort. Senator Maria Lopez from the United States asked the question everyone was thinking. What do they mean by judgment? What are they judging us for? Dr. Cross shook his head. I do not know, but the fact that they called it judgment and mentioned extinction protocols suggests they have done this before. They might have judged other species in the past. General Nick Carter stood up from his chair. He was a military man who had fought in 3 wars and never backed down from a fight. We cannot just surrender to these aliens. If they want to judge humanity, then humanity should be ready to defend itself. With what? Asked Dr. Cross. They can send messages across the galaxy instantly. Their technology is probably thousands of years ahead of ours. Fighting them would be like throwing rocks at a tank. Admiral Kane listened to the arguments going back and forth. She had commanded fleets in space for 20 years and knew that sometimes the best defense was a good offense, but she also knew when humanity was outmatched. We need more information before we make any decisions. Dr. Cross, what can you tell us about this Galactic Enforcement Council? I have been monitoring alien communications for years, Dr. Cross replied. I have detected fragments of messages that mention something called the Council. From what I can understand, they seem to be some kind of governing body that controls multiple star systems, but I have never detected any responses from species that were called to judgment. The room went quiet, as everyone understood what that meant. If no one had ever returned from a council judgment, then judgment probably meant death. Commander Rick Hayes was listening from the back of the room. He was in charge of Earth's most secret military unit, the Deep Space Reconnaissance Division. His team used experimental stealth ships to gather intelligence in areas where humans were not supposed to go. Admiral Kane requests permission to take my team and investigate this council. If we are going to face judgment, we should know what we are walking into. Lisa nodded. Permission granted, Commander. Take your best people and your most advanced ship Find out everything you can about this council and report back within 20 days. As the meeting continued, Jake Morrison's ship was already heading back to Earth at maximum speed. He had left a skeleton crew on patrol and brought his best officers with him. The journey would take 15 days, but Jake used every hour to prepare his crew for what might be coming. Lieutenant Ben Cooper worked around the clock to analyze the alien transmission. "Captain, I found something interesting in the signal patterns. The message was not sent directly to us, it was broadcast to this entire region of space. That means other species might have received similar messages." Jake studied the data on his personal screen. "So we are not the first species they have called to judgment. The question is, what happened to the others?" Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's science officer, had been running simulations on her computers. "Captain, based on the transmission power and the distance it traveled, this council has access to energy sources that we cannot even imagine. If they wanted to destroy Earth, they could probably do it from wherever they are located." "Then why call us to judgment at all?" Jake asked. "Why not just destroy us if that is what they want?" Amy had been thinking about that same question. Maybe they need something from us, or maybe they follow some kind of legal process that requires judgment before execution. Either way, they are giving us 30 days to respond. As Earth's governments continued to debate and plan, Jake Morrison made a decision that would change everything. He called Admiral Kane on a private channel and made a proposal that surprised everyone. "Admiral, what if we do not go to this judgment as defeated prisoners? What if we go as equals who demand to be heard?" Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "Explain what you mean, Captain." "They expect us to come begging for mercy like every other species probably did. But what if we come prepared, to put them on trial instead? What if we make them prove that they have the right to judge us?" The idea was dangerous and probably impossible. But as Lisa thought about it, she realized it might be humanity's only chance. If they were going to die anyway, they might as well die fighting. The Council's Judgment Day was coming, but humanity would meet it on their own terms. The next morning, Earth woke up to a world that had changed forever. Every news channel on the planet was broadcasting the same story about aliens and Judgment Day. People gathered in the streets, in their homes, and in their places of worship to talk about what it all meant. Some were scared, some were angry, and some were excited to finally know that humans were not alone in the universe. Admiral Lisa Kane stood in the main command center watching dozens of screens that showed military bases around the world coming to life. Soldiers who had been sleeping were now loading weapons and preparing ships. Scientists who had been working on peaceful projects were now building tools of war. The entire planet was preparing for something that had never happened before. Dr. Amy Foster walked into the command center carrying a metal briefcase that she had never been allowed to show anyone before today. "Admiral, I need to tell you about some projects that have been kept secret for a very long time." Amy opened the briefcase and pulled out plans for weapons that looked like they came from science fiction movies. "For the past 30 years, we have been working on something called Project Titan. We found pieces of alien technology that crashed on Earth decades ago, and we have been learning from them. We now have energy shields, plasma weapons, and gravity manipulation devices. They are not as advanced as what the aliens probably have, but they are much better than anything else humans have ever built." Lisa studied the weapon designs with growing amazement. "How many of these weapons can we build in 25 days? If every factory on Earth works around the clock, we can build enough weapons to arm 50 ships and defend every major city on the planet. It will not be easy, but it can be done." Colonel Steve Parker was already coordinating the largest military operation in human history. Every nation on Earth had agreed to work together for the first time ever. Russian engineers were working with American scientists. Chinese factories were building weapons designed by European researchers. African mining operations were providing materials that were being processed in South American facilities. "We are building a fleet like nothing humanity has ever seen before," Steve reported to Admiral Kane. "Every available ship is being converted into a warship. Cargo vessels are getting armor and weapons. Passenger ships are being turned into troop transports. Even civilian yachts are being equipped with defensive systems. Tony Miller was one of the engineers working on the ship modifications. He had designed commercial spacecraft for 20 years, but now he was learning how to turn peaceful vessels into weapons of war. The biggest challenge is power, he explained to his team. These new weapons need 10 times more energy than our ships were designed to provide. We have to completely rebuild the power systems on every ship. Meanwhile, on the surface of Earth, massive construction projects were taking place in every major city. Helen Wade was an architect who had designed beautiful buildings her entire career. Now she was designing underground bunkers that could protect millions of people from alien attacks. If the worst happens and our fleet is destroyed, the people on Earth need somewhere safe to hide, she told the construction crews who were working day and night. Intelligence analyst Kate Ross was working in a secret facility trying to learn everything possible about the aliens before the deadline. She had access to every piece of information that governments around the world had collected about extraterrestrial life. Most of it had been rumors and false reports, but some of it was real. I found something important, Kate announced during a briefing with Admiral Kane and the other leaders. We have been detecting alien communications for decades, but we never understood what they meant. Now that I know what to look for, I can see patterns in the data. The aliens have done this judgment process many times before. Kate showed her findings on a large screen. Every few years, the alien communications increase in a specific pattern. Then there is always a period of complete silence. I think the silence means that whatever species was being judged is no longer able to send messages. The implications were clear and terrifying. Every species that had been called to judgment had been destroyed. Commander Rick Hayes returned from his reconnaissance mission with news that confirmed everyone's worst fears. The Council operates from a massive space station in a dead solar system about 50 light-years from Earth. The station is the size of a small moon, and it is protected by weapons that could destroy entire planets. Rick had used his most advanced stealth ship to observe the Council station without being detected. I watched them conduct a judgment while I was there. A species called the Deltans sent a small diplomatic ship with 3 ambassadors. The Council listened to them speak for about 10 minutes. Then they activated some kind of weapon that made the Deltan ship simply disappear. After that, they sent a fleet to the Deltan homeworld and destroyed every living thing on the planet. The room was silent as everyone absorbed this information. They were not just facing judgment, they were facing certain death. Dr. Charles Ray and Professor Linda Shaw had been working with a team of historians and philosophers to prepare humanity's defense. They had studied every war crime trial and every legal precedent they could find. If we are going to challenge the Council's authority, we need evidence of their crimes, Charles explained. We need to prove that they are not judges, but murderers. Linda had been collecting stories from all over Earth about what made humanity special. Every species the Council has judged was probably begging for mercy and trying to prove they were harmless. We need to do the opposite. We need to prove that humanity deserves to exist because we are willing to fight for what is right. As the deadline approached, Jake Morrison was preparing his ship for a mission that would probably end in death. His crew had volunteered to stay with him even though they knew they might never see Earth again. Lieutenant Ben Cooper had modified the ship's communication system so they could broadcast to every species in the galaxy. If we are going to die, at least we can make sure everyone knows the truth about the Council, Ben said. The human fleet that was preparing to face the Council was unlike anything that had ever been assembled. 47 ships representing every nation and every group of people on Earth. Each ship carried weapons that had never been tested in real combat, and crews who had trained for only a few weeks. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of her flagship looking out at the other ships in the formation. Every species that faced the Council before us went alone and afraid. We are going together and we are going to fight. That might not be enough to save us, but at least we will die as humans should die, standing up for what we believe in. The 30 days were almost over. The Council's judgment day was coming, but humanity was as ready as they could possibly be. They had weapons they had never used, ships they had never tested, and a plan that had never been tried. Most importantly, They had something that no other species had brought to judgment: the determination to fight back. The human fleet began its journey to the coordinates the Council had provided. Behind them, Earth continued preparing for war. If the fleet failed, the planet would fight to the last person. Humanity had decided that if they were going to be judged, they would make sure the universe remembered how they faced that judgment. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly where the Council had told them to go. 47 ships appeared in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with new armor and weapons that had never been fired in anger. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the massive structure floating before them. The Council station was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It looked like a small metal moon with towers and spikes jutting out in every direction. Lights moved across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at. Energy fields shimmered around the station like deadly rainbows. Just looking at it made Jake understand how small and weak humanity really was compared to these aliens. "Captain, we are being scanned," reported Lieutenant Ben Cooper from his position at the communication station. "Multiple energy beams are examining our ships from every direction. They know everything about our weapons, our armor, and probably our crew members too." Admiral Lisa Kane was on the flagship at the center of the human formation. She had been in space battles before, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The Council station was not just a building. It was a weapon that could probably destroy Earth without trying very hard. "All ships, maintain formation and prepare for whatever comes next," Lisa broadcast to the entire fleet. "Remember, we came here to face judgment, but we also came here to deliver one. Stay calm and follow the plan." The plan was simple but dangerous. Instead of begging for mercy like every other species had done, humanity would demand to be treated as equals. They would present evidence of the Council's crimes and challenge their right to judge anyone. It was probably suicide, but it was the only chance they had. A new voice came through the communication system. It spoke perfect English, but sounded like it was coming from something that had never been human. "Human vessels, you will send 3 representatives to the Council station immediately. You will come unarmed, and you will submit to judgment. Any deviation from these instructions will result in immediate destruction." Lisa looked around the bridge at her crew members. Everyone was waiting for her decision. They could follow the instructions and hope for mercy, or they could stick to the plan and probably die fighting. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Lisa Kane speaking for the human species. We will send our representatives to your station, but we will not come as prisoners. We come as equals who demand to be heard." The silence that followed lasted for almost a minute. Jake wondered if the aliens were so shocked by the response that they needed time to decide how to react. No species had ever spoken to the Council as an equal before. "Human Admiral, your species will comply with standard judgment procedures or face immediate extinction. You have no choice in this matter." Lisa smiled grimly. "We always have a choice. We choose to come to your station and present our case. We also choose to bring evidence that your Council is not qualified to judge anyone." The human delegation prepared to board a shuttle that would take them to the Council station. Admiral Kane would lead the group along with Dr. Alan Cross, Captain Jake Morrison, and 12 other representatives from different parts of Earth. Each person carried a sealed container that held evidence of the Council's crimes against other species. As the shuttle approached the Council station, Jake could see that it was even more massive than it had looked from a distance. Docking bays large enough to hold entire cities opened in the station's hull. The shuttle was guided by some kind of invisible force into a bay that was filled with ships from dozens of different alien species. "Look at all those ships," whispered Dr. Cross. "They must be from the species that serve the Council. We are going to be facing judges from races we have never even imagined." The docking bay was filled with aliens of every possible shape and size. Some looked like giant insects, others looked like living crystals. There were creatures made of metal and others that seemed to be made of pure energy. All of them stopped what they were doing to stare at the humans as they walked through the bay. Jake noticed that none of the aliens looked happy or proud to be serving the Council. Most of them looked scared or defeated. He began to wonder if the Council's servants were actually prisoners who had been forced to work for their conquerors. The human delegation was escorted through corridors that were built for creatures much larger than humans. The walls were covered with symbols and pictures that showed the Council's power over dozens of different worlds. Jake saw images of planets being destroyed and entire species being wiped out. The message was clear: obey the Council or be destroyed. The Judgment Chamber was a huge room with seats for thousands of observers. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in the viewing areas, watching as the humans were brought before 5 massive thrones. The creatures sitting on the thrones were so alien that Jake's mind had trouble understanding what he was looking at. The first throne held something that looked like a giant reptile covered in scales that shifted color constantly. The second throne contained a creature made of what appeared to be living crystal that pulsed with internal light. The third being looked like a cloud of gas held together by some invisible force. The fourth was a mechanical creature with too many arms and legs to count. The fifth throne held something that Jake could not even describe because it seemed to exist in more dimensions than his human eyes could process. "Humans," spoke the reptilian creature in a voice that echoed through the chamber. "You stand accused of crimes against galactic peace and order. Your species has engaged in warfare, destroyed your environment, and shown aggressive tendencies toward expansion into space. How do you answer these charges?" Admiral Kane stepped forward and looked up at the 5 creatures without showing any fear. "We reject your authority to judge us. We reject your charges as hypocritical, and we demand that you answer for your own crimes against the galaxy." The chamber fell completely silent. In 12,000 years of judgments, no species had ever rejected the Council's authority. The alien observers in the viewing areas began making sounds of surprise and confusion in languages that humans could not understand. The crystal creature pulsed brighter with what might have been anger. "You dare to question the authority of the Council? We have maintained order in this galaxy for longer than your species has existed. We have prevented wars and protected peaceful civilizations from aggressive ones like yourselves." Dr. Cross activated a holographic projector that he had hidden in his sealed container. Images appeared in the air above the human delegation, showing planets being destroyed and entire species being wiped out. "These are recordings of your previous judgments. You have not prevented wars, you have committed genocide. You have not protected peaceful civilizations, you have murdered them." The gas cloud being spoke in a voice like wind through metal. "Those species were judged and found guilty of crimes against galactic order. Their destruction was necessary to maintain peace." Jake Morrison stepped forward and activated his own projector. More images appeared showing secret Council communications that his intelligence teams had intercepted. "These are your own records proving that you judged species not for their crimes but for their potential to challenge your power. You destroyed the Altarians because they developed communication technology you could not control. You wiped out the Deltans because they refused to provide you with resources you demanded. The mechanical creature's many arms moved in patterns that might have been agitation. How did you obtain classified Council communications? Your species lacks the technology to intercept our secure channels." Admiral Kane smiled. "We are more advanced than you thought. We have been watching you and learning about you for years. We know that you are not judges, you are tyrants. And we know that many of the species in this chamber are here against their will." As she spoke, some of the alien observers in the viewing areas began looking at each other in ways they had never done before. Jake realized that many of these species had never been allowed to communicate with each other. The Council had kept them isolated and afraid to prevent them from working together. The reptilian creature stood up from its throne, and Jake could see that it was at least 15 feet tall. "Enough of this disruption. Security forces will remove the human delegation immediately. Judgment will proceed according to established protocols." But as the security forces moved toward the humans, something unexpected happened. Some of the guards stopped moving and others began backing away from the human delegation. For the first time in thousands of years, the Council's own enforcers were questioning their orders. The hesitation of the security forces lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to change everything. In those few seconds, the alien observers in the viewing galleries saw something they had never seen before: the Council's authority being questioned by their own enforcers. Dr. Alan Cross took advantage of the confusion to activate more holographic projectors hidden throughout the chamber. Suddenly, the entire room was filled with images and recordings that showed the Council's crimes across thousands of years. Species after species appeared in the holograms, all of them being destroyed not for crimes they had committed, but for refusing to submit completely to Council authority. The Vegan Collective was destroyed because they developed faster than light travel that the Council could not control, Dr. Cross announced to the chamber. The Harmony worlds were wiped out because they refused to provide slave labor for Council construction projects. The Silicon Brotherhood was eliminated because they created artificial intelligence that could not be programmed to obey the Council. Each revelation caused more disruption in the viewing galleries. Species that had been told these civilizations were relocated for their own safety now learned they had been murdered. Delegates who had served the Council faithfully for centuries began to understand they had been serving mass murderers. Captain Jake Morrison activated his communication device, and his voice echoed through the chamber and beyond to every ship and planet in the region. Citizens of the galaxy, you are seeing the truth about your rulers for the first time. The Council has maintained power not through justice but through fear. They have prevented you from talking to each other because they knew that together you would be stronger than they are. The reptilian creature on the first throne made a sound like a roar mixed with a scream. Silence this disruption immediately. Activate Security Protocol 7 and eliminate all humans in the chamber. But when the security chief gave the order to attack, something unprecedented happened. Security forces made up of different alien species looked at each other instead of following orders. A creature that looked like a giant insect turned to a being made of liquid metal and spoke in a language that the translation systems converted to English. Should we really kill these humans for telling the truth? Have we been enforcing justice or helping murderers? The liquid metal being responded in the same translated voice. I have served the Council for 300 years. In all that time I have never seen a species return from judgment. I thought they were relocated, but now I understand they were all killed. Admiral Lisa Kane saw the confusion spreading among the security forces and the observers. This was the moment they had planned for, the moment when the Council's authority would finally be challenged by their own subjects. Guards, citizens, fellow prisoners of the Council, Lisa called out to the entire chamber. You have been told that the Council maintains order and protects peace. But how can there be peace when it is built on the bones of entire civilizations? How can there be order when it depends on fear and isolation? In the viewing galleries, delegates from different species began doing something that had been forbidden for thousands of years. They began talking to each other. The aquatic Neptunians reached out with tentacles to touch the crystalline beings from Sigma Draconis. The energy creatures from the Vortex Nebula communicated directly with the plant-based life forms from the garden worlds. The gas cloud being on the third throne began swirling faster, which might have been a sign of panic. This communication between species is forbidden under Council law. All participants will be charged with conspiracy against galactic order. But the communication continued and spread. Species that had been kept apart for millennia discovered they had more in common than they had differences. They all shared the experience of being conquered by the Council and forced to serve under threat of extinction. Commander Rick Hayes, who had been standing quietly near the back of the human delegation, stepped forward and activated one more projector. We have saved the most important evidence for last. These are recordings of the Council's private meetings where they discuss which species to eliminate next. The new holograms showed the 5 Council members in their private chambers discussing the galaxy like it was their personal property. They spoke casually about destroying entire worlds to make room for their own projects. They laughed about the fear they inspired in their subjects. Most shocking of all, they discussed plans to eliminate half of the current member species within the next century because the galaxy was becoming too crowded for their taste. The crystal, being on the second throne, pulsed so brightly it hurt to look at. These recordings are fabricated. No human technology could penetrate our secure communications. Rick Hayes smiled. We had help. Some of your own people have been secretly working against you for years. Did you really think you could oppress entire civilizations forever without some of them finding ways to fight back? As if summoned by his words, several figures stepped out from behind pillars in the chamber. They were aliens wearing council security uniforms, but now they removed their helmets to reveal their true faces. There was a Neptunian commander, a crystalline engineer, and a dozen others from different species. The Neptunian spoke with water flowing from its mouth as the words were translated. We have been gathering evidence against the council for 50 years. We have been waiting for someone brave enough to stand up to them. The humans have given us that opportunity. The mechanical creature on the fourth throne made clicking sounds that might have been curses in its native language. Traitors and rebels will be eliminated along with the humans. Activate the station's ultimate weapon. Destroy every ship in the region and sterilize every world that has heard these transmissions. But when the orders were given to activate the ultimate weapon, nothing happened. The weapons officer, a creature that looked like a living tree, remained motionless at its control station. I refuse to commit genocide, the tree creature announced. I have followed orders for 800 years, but I will not murder innocent billions to protect the council's lies. The refusal to obey spread like a fire through the station's crew. Communications officers refused to jam the signals carrying the truth to other worlds. Navigation officers refused to target the weapon systems. Engineering crews refused to provide power to the ultimate weapon. Jake Morrison realized that this was the moment they had been hoping for, but had not dared to expect. The council's own servants were finally rebelling against their masters. The reptilian creature stood to its full height and roared loud enough to shake the chamber. This rebellion will be crushed. Loyal forces will restore order and eliminate all traitors. But as the creature spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The human fleet outside had not been waiting passively. While the delegation faced judgment, Captain Morrison's ships had been using the distraction to target the station's critical systems. Lieutenant Ben Cooper's voice came through the communication system from the human fleet. Admiral Kane, our scans show that the station's main reactor is overloading. Someone has sabotaged the power systems from the inside. The sabotage had been carried out by alien rebels who had been waiting years for this moment. Now that the truth was finally being revealed, they were destroying the Council's ability to enforce their will through superior technology. As explosions began to rock the station, Admiral Kane addressed the chamber one final time. Citizens of the galaxy, today you have learned the truth about your rulers. Today you have the chance to choose freedom over fear. Today you can decide whether you will continue to be subjects of tyrants or become partners in a new galactic community based on cooperation instead of domination. The 5 council members began backing toward hidden escape routes, but they found their way blocked by their own former servants. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Enforcement Council was facing judgment from those they had oppressed. The revolution had begun, and it was spreading faster than the Council could stop it. The explosions grew stronger as more systems failed throughout the Council station. Emergency lights flickered on and off while alarms screamed in dozens of different alien languages. But instead of panic, something remarkable was happening in the Judgment Chamber. For the first time in thousands of years, representatives from different species were working together. The Neptunian delegates used their natural ability to move through small spaces to help evacuate injured beings from collapsed sections of the chamber. The crystalline entities from Sigma Draconis provided light in the darkened areas, while their internal energy sustained life support systems. The mechanical beings shared their tools to free trapped creatures from debris. Admiral Lisa Kane coordinated the evacuation efforts while keeping one eye on the 5 council members who were trapped in their own chamber. The reptilian creature was still trying to give orders, but no one was listening anymore. The crystal being had stopped pulsing and seemed to be in some kind of shock. The gas cloud creature was dispersing and reforming rapidly in what might have been fear. All ships, this is Admiral Kane, Lisa broadcast to both the human fleet and the alien vessels in the region. The station is failing and we need to evacuate everyone who wants to leave. Any species that wishes to join the evacuation is welcome aboard our ships. Captain Jake Morrison was coordinating rescue operations from his ship when Lieutenant Ben Cooper reported something unexpected. Captain, we are receiving responses from alien vessels throughout the system. They are not just accepting our offer of rescue, They are offering to help with the evacuation themselves. For the first time in galactic history, ships from different species were working together without being forced to do so by the Council. Neptunian vessels used their advanced medical facilities to treat injured survivors. Crystalline ships provided power to damaged vessels. The mechanical beings shared their repair technology to keep rescue ships running. Dr. Amy Foster was leading a technical team through the failing station to rescue valuable equipment and records. "We need to save the Council's archives," she told her mixed team of humans and aliens. "Those records contain evidence of their crimes, but they also contain the locations of species that were supposedly relocated. Some of those civilizations might still be alive in prison camps or slave colonies." As the rescue efforts continued, the 5 council members finally abandoned their escape attempts and tried to negotiate with their former subjects. The reptilian creature approached Admiral Kane with what might have been desperation in its voice. "Human Admiral, perhaps we have acted hastily in our judgments. The Council would be willing to consider reforms and changes to our procedures. Your species could be granted special status as advisors to help us govern more fairly." Lisa looked at the creature with disgust. "You have murdered billions of innocent beings across thousands of years. You have ruled through fear and oppression. There are no reforms that could make that acceptable. Your time as rulers is over." The crystal being tried a different approach, speaking directly to some of the alien delegates who were helping with the evacuation. "Fellow entities, do not let the humans deceive you with their promises of freedom. Without the Council's guidance, the galaxy will fall into chaos and war. You need our wisdom to maintain order." But the alien delegates had heard enough lies. A Neptunian commander who had served the Council for centuries spoke for many others. "Your wisdom has given us nothing but death and suffering. We would rather face uncertainty as free beings than live as slaves under your protection." As the evacuation neared completion, explosions deep in the station's core began tearing the massive structure apart. The ultimate weapon that the Council had threatened to use was consuming the station from within, destroyed by the same alien rebels who had served as the Council's enforcers for so long. Commander Rick Hayes led the final evacuation team off the station, just as the main reactor finally exploded. The Council station, symbol of tyranny for 12,000 years, broke apart in a brilliant flash of light that could be seen across the solar system. When the light faded, something unprecedented floated in the space where the station had been. Hundreds of ships from dozens of different species hung in formation together, their crews no longer enemies or subjects, but partners in creating something new. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at the mixed fleet. Representatives from every species were requesting permission to come aboard her ship for a meeting that would decide the future of the galaxy. The meeting took place in the ship's main cargo bay, which was the only space large enough to hold representatives from so many different species. Beings who had never been allowed to speak to each other freely now shared ideas and dreams for the first time. Dr. Alan Cross served as a translator and mediator, using advanced computer systems to convert dozens of different languages into formats everyone could understand. "We need to decide what comes next. The Council is gone, but we still need some way to coordinate trade, prevent conflicts, and protect ourselves from external threats." The discussions continued for days as the mixed fleet traveled slowly through space. Some species wanted to return, to complete isolation and never deal with galactic politics again. Others wanted to create a new council with better leaders and fairer laws. Still others proposed a completely different system based on cooperation rather than domination. Captain Jake Morrison found himself serving as an unofficial mediator between different groups. His experience as a ship captain had taught him how to get different people to work together toward common goals. "Maybe we do not need any central government at all," he suggested during one heated discussion. "Maybe each species can govern itself while working together on projects that benefit everyone." The idea of voluntary cooperation instead of forced obedience was revolutionary, but it appealed to species that had suffered under council rule. The Neptunians offered to share their medical technology with anyone who needed it. The crystalline beings volunteered to provide energy systems for developing worlds. The mechanical species offered to help build infrastructure for civilizations that were rebuilding after Council oppression. As the discussions continued, rescue teams were already implementing the new cooperative approach. Ships equipped with the Council's stolen archives were traveling to prison worlds and slave colonies to free species that had been hidden away for centuries. Some civilizations that everyone thought were extinct were found alive in hidden locations. Dr. Charles Ray and Professor Linda Shaw worked with alien historians to document everything that had happened and ensure that future generations would learn from the Council's crimes. "We must never allow another group to gain this kind of power over others," Charles said during one of the documentation sessions. 3 months after the destruction of the Council station, representatives from 97 different species met on a neutral world to sign the Galactic Cooperation Accords. Unlike the Council's laws, which had been imposed by force, these accords were agreements freely entered into by all participants. The accords established principles that seemed simple, but were revolutionary for galactic civilization. No species could be forced to join or leave the cooperation network. No species could be judged or punished by others for their internal affairs. All species would share technology and resources freely to help each other develop and prosper. Conflicts would be resolved through discussion and compromise rather than force. Admiral Kane was elected as the first coordinator of the Galactic Cooperation Network, but her power was limited and temporary. Every major decision had to be approved by representatives from all member species, and the coordinator position would rotate between different species every few years. Jake Morrison returned to Earth as a hero, but he was more interested in the future than in celebrating the past. The human fleet had been reinforced by alien volunteers who wanted to continue exploring the galaxy together. Mixed crews of humans and aliens were already planning expeditions to regions that had been forbidden under Council rule. The Council's Judgment Day had indeed arrived with humanity, but the judgment had not gone as the Council expected. Instead of destroying another species to maintain their power, they had awakened a galaxy of oppressed civilizations who chose freedom over fear. As Jake stood on his ship's bridge looking out at a mixed fleet of human and alien vessels preparing for their next mission, he realized that humanity had given the galaxy something more valuable than advanced technology or military strength. They had given them the idea that different species could work together as equals rather than as rulers and subjects. The age of the Council was over, and the age of cooperation had begun. The stars that had once been ruled by fear now shone with the light of hope, and the galaxy would never be the same.